Well, hi everyone. Taylor Swift here, the internet's busiest...
I love your music, Miss Swift. I'm your biggest fan.
I am not actually Taylor Swift.
1999, good record.
And it's time for a review of the new Big K.R.I.T record, Cadillactica. Big K.R.I.T is a Mississippi rapper and producer who built a pretty solid buzz for himself a few years ago off of some mixtapes, essentially free albums. Like K.R.I.T Was Here, Return of Forever, Forever in a Day, mixtapes that showed off some great production, some great rapping, as well as influences that ran from Outkast to UGK and maybe a little bit of Goody Mob, 8Ball and MJG, Scarface, and a little bit of Kanye. Artistically, K.R.I.T was pulling directly from some of the South's greatest hip-hop artists ever. But on top of that, K.R.I.T was also an incredibly versatile voice as well, putting together some really great conscious tracks, as well as just more fun, upbeat, party-oriented tracks. He was bringing one great project after another, and then came his commercial debut, Live from the Underground, unfortunately kind of a flop among fans, something that K.R.I.T has readily admitted in numerous bars since the release of this record. And it was for a number of reasons. Some overly simplistic singles that very clearly were trying to get radio play, some very redundant hooks on here, some tracks that instrumentally kind of had the steam sucked right out of them because some samples didn't get cleared. Now, since the release of this commercial record, K.R.I.T has dropped another mixtape that was pretty decent, King Remembered in Time. What really kept it from being exciting is that it was kind of predictable. The production, the rapping, after essentially stirring up some major buzz with this tape and then dropping 3 more projects on people afterwards, I think people were just really too well acquainted with his sound and didn't really find that much in the way of surprises or freshness on this new tape. And that is a call I think K.R.I.T heeded, because he most definitely started to shake things up with some of his new singles. He did that Week of K.R.I.T thing where he dropped a series of tracks for an entire week. Some of these songs featured different production for him, some new features, and a few tracks were pretty great, namely the song he had with Rick Ross and Lack Lack with A$AP Ferg. But the best of all the tracks K.R.I.T was dropping around this time is the track Mount Olympus, which maybe has some of his most fiery spitting and bars in years. He just turned his flow up, all the way up on this track, and his frustration, his passion for the creative process and the music industry and keeping fans and the general hip-hop audience pleased and happy and interested in what you're doing came through in a really strong way. And I'm just here kind of hoping that passion and that drive carries through into this new record. Now, this record, before it was even released, came with another change of pace, and that is K.R.I.T is working with other producers on this record. He is writing other people's production, which on previous K.R.I.T projects is kind of a no-no. However, the results we were seeing prior to the release of this album through the singles was pretty positive, at least for me. I dug the tracks like Pay Attention, which had production from Jim Johnson, or DJ Dahi on the title track here, which was incredibly hard-hitting. So it's possible these collaborators could breathe new life into a K.R.I.T project. So not only are there guest producers on this record, but there's a pretty varied and long list of guest songwriters, rappers, and singers too. People like super producer and songwriter Raphael Saadiq, E40, Bun B, Wiz Khalifa, Devin the Dude, longtime collaborator Big Sant, Kenneth Whalum III, a band leader who's worked with numerous pop stars in the past, Mara Ruby, and Lupe Fiasco. Did I mention Lupe Fiasco? Lupe Fiasco. This thing is 15 tracks long. It has a few deluxe tracks as well, one of them being Lack Lack and Mount Olympus, though it's a different version of that track, a different beat. And I really can't be the only person that thinks this new version is far inferior to the original. Regardless, though, I do like the start of this record. It starts like a dream, or kind of like waking up from a dream. It sounds like K.R.I.T is either about to sleep or can't quite go to sleep, and there's this little female voice itching at him, waking him up, keeping him wired, saying, "Create." And for anybody who has the creative process as a regular part of their life knows that that voice is a difficult thing to say no to sometimes. And in the lyrics, I feel like we get closer to what K.R.I.T feels about this process. He obsesses over it. He obsesses not only over creation and progression, but perfection too. And this instrumental, like many instrumentals that sit at the beginning of Big K.R.I.T albums, is kind of easing us into the record. It's smooth, it's funky, this one in particular is a little nocturnal, and instantly we are glided into a much more riveting and hard-hitting track, the song Life. On this track, lyrically and rappingly, Big K.R.I.T, like on Mount Olympus, sounds aggressive, he's hungry. There are these epic marching drums that remind me quite a bit of like maybe some College Dropout Kanye, and maybe even a little bit of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy Kanye. I like the idea of the inclusion of these kinds of drums in a Big K.R.I.T song. It's most definitely something new, something different for him. However, the way that they're mixed, they just sound so unpleasant and distorted, and they don't really have the bassy punch that I would hope for a big drum section like this to have. It kind of kills the viscera of the song. However, when it comes to the emotional impact of the lyrics, the song is a heavy hitter. The song essentially being about life, opportunity, taking chances, making things happen for yourself, putting work in for yourself, breaking that sweat. One line right at the start of the track that I love is, "Transition, I missed my mark day one. I was so close to the sun, I burnt the top off my roof." Sort of building this image of him sort of driving his car through like a space type atmosphere. It's lines and songs like this where K.R.I.T comes off as this guy who, in order to attain success, he's going to play this underdog position and just bleed and sweat and crawl and cry and scream his way across the finish line. He's not one of these rappers that just kind of makes it look easy. And that's what I think keeps many people in tune and interested in Big K.R.I.T. Even though he may not be the most viral artist out there, people who do tend to be more in tune with their struggles and the obstacles that they need to overcome in life quickly identify with what K.R.I.T is going through. So with tracks like this, it's great to hear K.R.I.T dropping new material that sounds new and different for him. But of course, he continues to stay in touch with his past and his roots, and I guess the formulas that he typically works with. For one, this new record, like many of his old records, does have kind of a structure, and the album works in phases, and you have songs of different flavors and in different parts, and the beginning sounds a certain way, and the end sounds a certain way. So in that sense, this record is a little predictable. But on the song My Sub Part 3, we hear K.R.I.T once again self-referencing and centering another song around his love of car stereos, but this one sounds much different than his previous tracks dealing with this issue. Instrumentally, the song is incredibly minimal and features a sub-bass hit that is so low, you may in fact need the 215s that K.R.I.T is rapping about on this song in order to pick up their full range. Can't twerk to the hi-hat, never. K.R.I.T's delivery sounds really nasty, just confident on this song. I love the hi-hats, I love the reversed cymbals, totally reminds me of some 80s hip-hop shit. And the melodic finish of this song is gorgeous. It's a really nice transition for the song to go so simple at the start and then sound really lush and beautiful at the end. Then after this, we get this trio of singles that were dropped before the record and songs that I really enjoy as a big K.R.I.T fan. However, these singles aren't really that exciting, honestly. I don't think they've done that much to drive the popularity of this record. He's had more successful singles in the past, which is fine. Not every single needs to be hot, and Big K.R.I.T isn't really one of these artists that just obsesses over the single. He's really more of an underground artist who happens to make music that has accessibility, and he is aware of that, and he has happily gone in that direction when a collaboration or an opportunity comes down the pipe and it seems to make sense, making tracks with 2 Chainz and Wiz Khalifa. Regardless, the title track of this thing, total banger. It's a little basic on the lyrics sometimes, especially on the hook, but the beat on this thing is gorgeous and has these synthesizers that, I don't know, give this sense of futuristicness. The cover of this single represents the music perfectly. Imagine driving this thing through space at 1,000,000 light years an hour. Even if the lyrics aren't top-notch for K.R.I.T, his delivery on the track is really aggressive, and the soaring chorus vocals toward the back end of this track are pretty nice. The song Soul Food is a bit of personal nostalgia for simpler times, more innocent times. The bass line on this thing is fantastic, really sticky. There's some chopped up pianos on this thing. The track sounds like some old, smooth funk got sampled, and lyrically, Big K.R.I.T is more on his thoughtful side, with a series of really nice food metaphors. And the song Pay Attention has a hook that reminds me of what might land on like a Drake song or something, but it's actually not that bad of a tune or a ballad. It's kind of a strip club themed slow jam where your attention is taken by all the things that normally go on in a strip club, but then there, or maybe somewhere else, you see the one, someone who's actually worth your time and worth your attention, and you sort of think, wow, why did I waste all my time not paying attention to this person? The album's freshness starts to dwindle a little bit at this point. We get the song King of the South, which sonically and topically, if you're familiar with K.R.I.T's previous stuff, you can probably guess what this song is going to say and sound like. This track could have turned up on any of K.R.I.T's 3 previous projects and nobody would have, oh yeah, okay, that sounds like that would fit here. But still, I do end up enjoying this song because K.R.I.T's aggressive streak in his rapping continues, and it does make the song kind of exciting. And the song Mind Control has these layered vocals on the chorus, which even if the chorus is catchy, they're just a bit much. I just want to tweak her mind. This hook is one of the few places where this album's slightly more commercial sound kind of ends up hurting it. And I'd be lying if I said I enjoyed the Wiz Khalifa and E40 verses, which I was kind of surprised by. The redundancy continues on tracks like Mo Better, Mo Cool, which, if it wasn't for the Bun B verse, it would have just felt like another song that could have been on any number of previous projects. Then the record moves into a phase where it's a little softer, a little easier on the ears, which in theory isn't necessarily a terrible thing. K.R.I.T has done softer tracks in the past that have come out great, but on the song Do You Love Me For Real, we have K.R.I.T singing, which again, he's done before, and it's turned out pretty well on previous stuff, even though he's not the most fantastic singer on the block. However, melodically, on this track, I think this song requires someone with a range that is wider than K.R.I.T's. I don't think he had the vocal talent to carry this song. His grasp extended his reach. And the song Third Eye, a little underwhelming, another slow jam, though I do love the sentiment of this track. It's kind of about being in love and wanting to build a life with this person and fantasizing about that and fantasizing about being in love with them on sort of a mental level as well. And the song Angels, I feel like K.R.I.T just breaches a line where he's just being a little too obvious with his more meaningful or sentimental statements. It's like he's really trying to say something deep and poetic about what he observes in the world around him, talking about the metaphysical. Do I see rain because God is crying? Do I see clouds because angels are getting high? Which continues on to the last track here, which I didn't really mind it up until the point where Lupe Fiasco appeared on the track. I like the theme of the song about sort of a lost generation and getting caught up in things that don't really amount to that much when it comes to your future, but when Lupe came in, I feel like his portrayal of the situation was just a little overly simplistic, just saying, oh, they're not playing this in the club, no one's listening to us. Every time Lupe says, people aren't listening to me, people aren't listening to this because this is too smart to be in the club, I don't really think it has anything to do with it being club-oriented, but really more just about self-fulfilling prophecy. You keep telling people they're not listening to you and they're not gonna listen to you. Meanwhile, K.R.I.T is an artist that makes songs with club appeal, and those songs are great. He makes smart songs too. So being that K.R.I.T is an artist who bridges that gap really well, I don't know why he would have an artist on that would just portray the whole thing as just black and white. Ugh, and that line, military-industrial complex. Could you make it sound more like you are talking down to the people who are listening? Seriously? Overall, I liked this record. I think the first half of it is near perfect, but it just kind of falls apart in the second half. It gets a little underwhelming. The more commercial streak of this record kind of gets the better of it on songs that aren't even singles, funnily enough. And some of the features don't even really add to the overall record's appeal. In some respects, I think this record is better than Live from the Underground, but in some respects, I think it's kind of worse too. I'm feeling a strong 6 to a light 7 on this thing. Transition. If you've given this thing a listen, what did you think about it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. Anthony Fantano, Big Crit, forever.